All right. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 7 of the Finance Operators Podcast. Today, I have my co-host, Mehtab, with me. Mehtab, how are you?
I'm always good.
Always
What about
good.
you?
Always good. We love to hear that. I'm great. It's a beautiful Monday morning. I messed up scheduling last week, so here we are kind of trying to get two of these episodes out in rapid succession. And there's a few things that I want to cover today. So we're going to spend the bulk of our time responding to a lot of your questions. Maytab put out a tweet sort of asking what you guys want to know about. So we're gonna spend most of our time sort of talking about most of those questions. But I do want to touch on a few other things that I think are particularly interesting. Number one being the health and wellness sort of overall trend. Obviously, Groons had a pretty monster fundraise that got leaked last week, or maybe it was the week before. But I think it's worth sort of just opining on a few of those things. And then I was doing some research on the THC beverage market and how
What did the research look like, Drew?
say that again.
I said some research. What did the research look like?
My weekend research of THC beverages, and I just it's interesting to kind of just double click. And obviously, everybody knows Breeze because Aaron shares their numbers wildly publicly. But taking a step back and kind of analyzing the overall market, I thought was pretty interesting too. So those are the couple things that I want to touch on. Anything you want to get into?
No, mostly just the questions that we have. I'm excited to cover them. Thanks for everyone who sent them in. And thank you to our sponsors, Numeral, Fulfill, Iris, and Fondue.
Cool. Let's dive into it. So I think, starting with sort of the overall health and wellness trend, it's been, leaked kind of around the Groons fundraise. There's a lot of those gummies in general are actually doing fairly well, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think
Obviously,
the form factor is just crushing it. Like, it's a very novel form factor, and we'll see if it lasts. But I'm curious.
which I find interesting. Like, what do you think about the durability of that? Because, like, to me, like Goalie.
Yep.
Like, gummies are not a new idea, but they seem to be like a new idea. I'm not sure I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and they're kind of painful. They take up a lot of space, and we'll see if they last. Like, I think it's hard to sit there and eat like 30 gummies, right? Like, I don't know who's sitting there just eating like 30 gummies. It adds up if you decide to get all of the supplements that you need from gummy format. So I think it'll probably fade away in like a year or two.
I kind of agree. Yeah, I used to take more supplements than I do, and I'll maybe say a little bit about that in a second. But I was taking like melatonin gummies, the like creatine gummies, and then apple cider vinegar gummies. And then at one point, I was just like, I'm just eating a bunch of candy all day. Like, this is like, so yeah, the form factor. I think it's just one of those things where consumers are like, I feel like I'm being healthy, but I'm just eating candy, and so I really like it. So as far as the whole gummy thing goes, we'll kind of see how it all shapes out. But one step back from the idea of gummies is just like this overall health and wellness trend. So, obviously, like AG1, Athletic Greens, one of the hot sort of unicorns of the category over the last, I don't know, 5 or 8 years, maybe. I don't know when they started, but there seems to have been quite a bit of a resurgence. And I see this just in my day to day. We have every gummy, mushroom supplement brand that comes to us seems to just be like absolutely crushing, and there seems to be no shortage of them either. So I want to just take a second to talk about this, because I think it's interesting from just like a business model perspective, and what makes these companies so appealing. So I'm curious, like, have you looked at in depth any like supplements or health and wellness type models?
Yeah, we're invested in one, and that one is like a nootropic type product for the elderly. And then, which sounds hilarious, and it's just a great company. And then, we looked at a lot of health and wellness. We generally try not to do anything in the space, just because it doesn't really fit our thesis, and I don't think we add too much value. It's just so marketing heavy. We can add a lot of value on the marketing side, but I don't feel like, I feel a lot of it's riding trend, right? If that makes sense in that space. What I found really interesting, to take a step back, is at the same time that health and wellness has been doing well, beauty's been doing very badly. This is the most inbound deal flow we've ever had from beauty. And almost
Hmm.
every one of my friends running a beauty brand, all the way down from like 5, 10 million revenue, all the way up to like 150 million, 200 million revenue. They're all having a really, really tough quarter. I thought it was interesting. Do you like, I always think of these two as moving in lockstep. Like if health and wellness does well, then typically beauty does well. Do you know what do you think is happening?
Um, to be honest, I feel like I've seen a lot of this chatter about like the beauty struggles, but I haven't really experienced it in our customer base. We have probably 2 or 3 dozen beauty companies that all seem to be doing perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Maybe more on like the skincare side of things. Hair care, we have a couple hair care brands that are absolutely crushing. So I think I feel a little bit disconnected with this assessment. But I could understand. Obviously, beauty had like a huge boom through the last, the early 2020s. So it could just be tough comps. I mean, it's hard to kind of you know grow over big numbers, kind of a thing. But
Right.
maybe I'll dig into some numbers and try to figure out what's really going on. But my sort of anecdotal sense of it is that there's nothing really to call out. But is there anything in the deal flow that you're seeing, like any? It's not like tariffs or anything like that, is it?
No, no, it's just general sluggish performance. And even going back to Q1 for some
Hmm.
of the brands, but it really seems to have gotten worse in the last since kind of March ish. Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting. And I did make a post about it on Twitter and I got a ton of comments, ton of PMs as
Huh.
well saying, oh yeah, we're not doing well. And a lot of these like very smart operators, like they're not stupid people. It's people I respect a lot. And they've done a really good job scaling their brands. They're really tightly managed. You go in there to find expenses to cut or something, you're not going to find much. They're very, very tight.
Hmm.
Um, but they're running into issues. So it feels like a macro thing. So if you're running a beauty company and you're doing well, good for you. You are beating the comps probably.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. And I do think they generally, it's kind of the same. Like sometimes when I see like a personal care brand or like a health and wellness brand, it's kind of hard to categorize them as like one or the
Right.
other. So I do kind of get what you're saying there. And I think okay, so you guys are invested in at least one of them. You tend to look at them, but maybe not of an area of focus. What do you think are the pros and the cons of the business model?
I think it can be really, really capital light and efficient in general, given margins are so high. Just structurally, you have really high margins in health and wellness typically. If you're a good marketer, I think it's a good place to be because that's where most of your expenses are going to sit. Like even more so than a regular D2C brand. I'm talking like, you could be running anywhere from like 50 to 60% spend of revenue, maybe higher.
Why might that
Um,
be?
why? Like the structurally high margins.
Like why does a supplements company spend more money on marketing than a typical
I
D2C
think it's
brand?
just hard to differentiate product in the space, right? Like even if you have a bunch of science behind your product, you're probably not really able to. It's hard to get IP behind it, right? In a sustainable way.
Yeah.
Like most of the time, it's just there's a new trend, and you're really good at riding the trend. I think one brand that did a really amazing job is Mary Ruth, if you're familiar. Started out on
Mhm.
Amazon, I believe, wrote it really hard. I had a chance to meet the founder once, really nice guy. He was crazy tactical. Like that guy joins 7-figure Amazon groups just to learn the latest tactics and hang out with them and stay fresh. But that guy is like, I don't know if this is still the case because I know they sold and then maybe they repurchased. I can't remember, but um, he's like in every channel, like hands on throat, like just crazy
Yeah.
tactical. I love it. And that's a 9-figure company. I think they're doing like over 300 million, over 200 million, like a lot.
Jeez.
And he's still very, very tactical. So I think that's the kind of person you have to be to make it work on the marketing side, especially.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Because it's kind of all garbage at the end of the day. So it's like, how do you stand out in the heaping, flaming pile of garbage? And
Yeah.
there's been like a few, like everybody knows about the like the ProMix deal. That was at the end of last year.
Oh, there's a
Raw.
bag of it behind you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're a customer of ours. So I
Well,
won't, I'm not going to say anything about them specifically, but it was a popular good deal. Raw Nutrition got bought a few weeks ago too. And then there's a handful more that I think we'll start to hear about throughout this quarter and next. And it was one of my 2025 predictions at the beginning of the year was that this category would stay hot. So I may have a little bit of sort of confirmation bias here, but to me it does feel like the category is kind of continuing to rip. And from my perspective, the most appealing part of it is like sort of the margin profile that you mentioned.
Right.
And it's very similar to beauty as well. I think
Yep.
the biggest difference between beauty and like supplements or health or whatever we want to sort of refer to the category as is actually the retention. And so, like beauty companies, you can have like pretty solid retention, but it's not going to be like put my Create gummies on subscription and just like let it rip for the next 3 years kind of a thing.
Mhm.
And so there's a little bit more consumption involved because health and wellness seems to kind of combine all the best things about like food and bev and all the best things about like beauty, for example. And so
Yep.
I think it's a really, really appealing category. And this whole like protein thing, I mean, is kind of crazy. Like, do you have any
Well,
thoughts
what's
on
funny to
that?
me about what's funny to me with the protein thing and the creatine thing is when I was younger, and I'm not that old, I'm 31, so this is like uh 2009, 2011-ish. It was like creatine was really popular back then. And we just
Hmm.
have I would just buy bags of monohydrate and just go that way. And same with
From
protein. And
like
just
bulk supplements or whatever. Remember that?
yeah, I do. Actually, do you remember bodybuilding.com?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
I actually know a bunch of the guys there now. Just
Oh,
randomly because they
really?
all like their team like defused into e-commerce in general. Like they're kind of one of the e-commerce OGs of content.
Totally.
They're like one of the first guys to do content plus e-commerce in a really big way. Like
Hmm.
their forums were massive. And if you're around
Yeah.
our age, like if you're between 28 and like 35, maybe, you know those forums, and a lot of memes originated from those forums at those times. Like if you spent a lot of time online and you're kind of nerd that worked out or something, you definitely know those forums. You spent too much time on them. So I just thought that was funny. But uh, yeah, I mean, I think the space is really interesting overall if you can catch trend well and stay alive and break into other forms of distribution, which I think Mary Ruth did a really good job of. So like I said, they started on Amazon, absolutely clobbered that channel, did a really good job, and then dominated retail. Like I think they're very well diversified now, but they crushed retail.
And I think you brought up an interesting point, which is something that I wanted to talk about. So like I was also reading this report from Whipstitch, which is like a consumer investment bank. And it was called like their healthy living update or something like that. And they said that the number one supplement in any like products was ashwagandha. Do you know what ashwagandha is?
Yep, ashwagandha root.
Yeah, yeah. So like that was number one, and then like obviously like you said, like you brought it up, like creatine like used to be popular, and the 2010s or whatever, and like I'm just like sitting here thinking to myself like so I've been taking like creatine and ashwagandha, for example, probably for 10 years.
Yeah,
Both of those things. And like protein, obviously, like my understanding of it was like protein, like you can't even like, digest like more than 25 grams or something in like any one serving of something. I'm not
I've always
exactly a
been told
scientist.
it's like a pound per. You want like 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, or something, or roughly 80%. I can't remember. My brother's like a professional power lifter, like world ranked. So
Oh, cool.
uh, I used to lift a lot too before I got all crippled and had a few bad surgeries, but that's probably not a good. If you're younger, don't keep lifting heavy. It's bad. That's what Drew said too. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think it's like 70 or 80% is the math as far as the protein side goes. Yeah, it's kind of weird seeing them trend. I feel like what happened is someone took those two things that were associated with like uh kind of the bro-ish bodybuilding culture and made them more appealing to mainstream.
Okay, so is that what's going on? Because to me, like these are not new things, but like I was like pretty into the weeds. Like my first ever brand was a supplements company in like
Cool.
2016 or 17 or something. And so that was like when I started to find out about all this stuff because you're doing like a lot of research kind of with
Mhm.
with the chemists and the manufacturers and formulation. And I'm just like I'm struggling to understand like are people just hearing about this stuff now, or is it like you said, like is it the mass market is now getting to it and like the trends sort of start in these like smaller communities, or like how do you think about sort of like the evolution, I guess, of the trend? Because to me like this trend was over 5 years ago, but really it's just starting.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I'm kind of surprised. I think it's maybe because of where we sit, like on the internet, males that were like right in the ideal kind of time
Yeah.
for being on bodybuilding.com or whatever. And I think that's why it feels like it's kind of coming back again. But really, it feels like it's just entering the mainstream consciousness really hard. And I think there's been, for quite a bit of time now, you've had more and more kind of these protein-infused products, right? Like Khloe Kardashian just released her popcorn. Did you see that? It's like,
I did
it's
see that,
protein
yeah.
popcorn. So I don't know why they're coming to popularity now, especially creatine. I think it's really funny. It's like, I remember my girlfriend, now wife, I gave her a bunch of creatine and I was like, just have this. And she looked at me like I was crazy, and now she's all about it. So times are changing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess we'll see how it kind of sticks. I thought it was something interesting to kind of bring up because I want to like pay more attention, I guess, and just like see, how do we maybe spot some more trends, going forward by just like taking things a little bit more serious. I always thought ashwagandha was like this, like it couldn't be like more niche, at least like, in spirit, but in reality, it's literally the number one ingredient for a lot of these
It's in like everything.
more healthy. Yeah, which is like insane to me.
And it all reminds me of are you familiar with like Tren, like the steroid?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a drug, and obviously we don't like drugs, so discounts are actually a drug as well. And fondue is rehab. Fondue will fix you no matter what you've been doing. So if you're burning dollars because of coupons, welcome to the club. Brands lose up to 20% of revenue to pointless, non-incremental discounting. Fondue replaces coupons with cash back and supercharges those margins. You'll keep more of what you earn, and you'll stop training your customer to wait for a code. It's cheap, fast, and easy to run with huge potential lift. Go to getfondue.com, tell them Finance Operator sent you, and let us know how it goes. Again, the other thing I just want to harp on is how easy it is to test, and you can market a larger percentage off just because such a small percentage of people end up claiming their coupon. Obviously, it'll depend by category and your brand, but totally worth a shot. Get it in the promotion calendar. Give it a shot. Let us know how it goes. Again, that's getfondue.com.
Cool. So, anything else on health and wellness for you, or do you want to move on?
Not really. I think we were saying like what we like, what we don't like about the category. Given we do a lot of, I wouldn't say debt, but debt-like structures or more structured equity, I don't like it because I don't feel like the revenue is very predictable. I feel like you need a lot of equity exposure specifically to kind of capture that upside that you see, right? And you need to be making a lot of bets in the space then, as opposed to just one bet. That's where you don't have too much equity exposure.
You mean like from like a product perspective?
I mean like in the space. It'd be like if I was playing tech and I decided to angel invest, but only in one company, like I probably won't make money. I need to do like, 25, 30 deals.
Yeah.
So for us, just doesn't really work with the thesis. I don't find there's enough in the cost line that I can go into tax. It doesn't matter. Like such a huge percentage of their spend as a company is on marketing. And yeah, like you can go and you can make it more efficient, but ultimately it's a game of like grinding landing pages, and like it's just not something we want to use as a source of reliable alpha. And I don't get sticky, right? Which is why you see some of these, like even run by great marketers, they'll just burn.
Yeah.
They can't do much at some point. So
yeah, I think to summarize it, there's this like general consensus that like software is like the perfect business model, right? Just from like a sort of asset light, gross margin scalability perspective. And so I always think about these consumer brands as like, how can you get them as close to software as possible? And like a highly retentive, low CAC supplements brand is probably the closest thing you can get. Where like, if you can get these people on subscription and you can have 70-80% gross margins, and obviously like there's lower inventory with that kind of margin. So like you can really kind of spin it up, and these things can spit off cash in a really crazy way. The downside in my mind is what you said, which is like, you do have to spend more on marketing just to stand out, because like it's the Wild West. Like the FDA doesn't actually regulate these companies, and so they kind of just say whatever the hell they want. And so there is a lot of crap. Like I think I saw Dan McCormick, actually the Create founder, he tweeted about how on Amazon I think that he bought a couple of different brands and like sent them to Eurofins or whatever, and they had literally no creatine. Did you see that?
no, but that makes sense. I mean, the difficulty too is you just end up with so much that you end up competing against them. You're paying for more expensive real estate on Amazon because of them,
right?
Et cetera. And then your margins get watered down over time. It's pretty brutal. It's like what we saw with Olaplex, right?
Mhm.
The question is like, can you move fast enough to capture enough value before you get crushed? And a lot of times you can. Like the Olaplex founders did really well. It doesn't really matter what happened to the company, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's the best way to think of it: is how much can you pull out of the company before the trend dies, it just becomes too competitive, et cetera.
Yeah, well, we will see what happens to gummies and overall health and wellness trend as the sort of year and decade continues to take shape. So, one other thing that I think is going to be pretty defining for this decade is the weed market. So the beverage market specifically with regards to THC. So, do you have any level of familiarity with that market and how it's sort of performing right now?
Yeah, so actually, I feel like Canada went through this cycle before the US did, because everything was legalized in 2019, maybe 2018, something like that. Um, and prior to that, enforcement was very lax, especially where I am. Um, it was more or less legal like 2 years before that. So
Hmm.
you kind of went through this where a lot of I think the biggest publicly traded weed company, I don't know if they're still around. They're definitely Canadian. Um, Til Tilray, is that them?
Tilray, yeah, that's one of them.
Tilray. Okay, yeah. And they actually, I think it was them. They acquired one of my friend's companies. And
Oh,
this is back.
really?
The space was super hot. He had like 100 grand in revenue. And they paid like a couple million for it. It was just crazy. He had literally nothing. I don't know if it was Tilray. It's one of the big publicly traded ones that were really hot in like 2018. So yeah, as far as I understand, the margins are a lot worse than people thought they would be, and the space has kind of cooled off a lot. And I know the hype behind Tilray. How's their stock doing?
I can't imagine very well.
Uh, it is, so it peaked in 2018 at
Oh, wow.
$148. Now it's at 48 cents.
Oh, that's too bad.
Uh, yeah, so the market cap's still 477 million. So I know what happened in Canada. I have a bunch of friends that have been in the business. And basically what happened is people launched brands, discovered it was really hard to build a brand, and it became kind of commoditized, basically, more or less. And they couldn't
Okay,
really charge premiums.
so that's really interesting that you say that commoditized. I want to revisit that in a second, and I
Mhm.
also believe that you are correct in the sense that Canada experienced this first. Because the reason that I'm bringing this up is because there was this company called Organigram, which is Canadian based. They're publicly traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. OGI is their ticker, and they bought this company called Collective Project. Which
Right.
was like Collective Art is a brewery. Do you know
Mhm.
Collective Art? Do you know what I'm talking about? No? Okay.
No.
So they're like a Canadian-based craft brewery, one of the top three beer imports from Canada to the
Oh,
US.
weird.
And
Okay.
so they launched like a hemp line, like a Breeze
Yep.
competitor, basically. Um, and it was bought by this organogram company for $6.2 million. They were doing 100K a month in sales in Canada, zero in the US. So there's like this whole deal structure around if they get to 500K in USA sales and $1 million in USA sales, they
Wow.
get $2 million in kicker for sort of each of those milestones.
Drew, like acquisitions aren't always certain, but you know what is certain?
Death.
And taxes. And you know who can help with the taxes part for you?
Numeral can help.
Our sponsor, Numeral. They make it easy to stay compliant. Brands like Immy, Woobles, Doe, and more use them. They have an insane guarantee, like literally insane, where if they do something correctly, they'll cover the cost of their mistake. They just raised a huge round, sitting on a pile of cash to make that guarantee fulfilled if it ever comes to it. So I would hit them up, head over there, and let them know that we sent you. It honestly
I've
is
seen,
the easiest
yeah,
way to do taxes. And they won't,
it's the best product.
yeah, they won't like hone you on the price increase like another certain legacy player did to us a few times at a few different brands. So I really like them. I love that it let us move off the legacy players that again had like absolute kind of death grip on the market, and we're kind of hurting brands and taking advantage of that. So go there, sign up, thank us.
I've
Let's
seen
go back.
so many like
Yeah.
sales tax mess ups lately,
Mhm.
honestly. And I would encourage everybody just to even just go like have a conversation with those guys because they might be able just to like find that you're making like a 6-figure, 7-figure mistake. So yeah,
Oh, cool.
give Numeral a shot. Great product. We love the team. Okay. So this company buys Collective Project, or is that what it's? I think that's what it's called. Let me make sure that's what it's called. Um, Collective Project. Yeah. Okay. So it's called Collective Project. They pay 6.2 million Canadian dollars, which I have a side question. That is Canadian dollars. Is it usually denominated by like C and then the American dollar sign?
Yep. Yeah, you'll see
Okay.
it a lot.
Okay, I didn't. I've only ever seen it as like CAD, but I
Oh,
saw
yeah, I
I
see that
saw
a
that
lot
this
too.
morning. I was just so it's Organigram is just like they have like 300 or $400 million in like annual revenue. They own these two companies. One is called Shred Weed. Are you a weed user? Are you going to know any of these Canadian brands?
No, I don't know anything. Like the amount there's more weed stores in Vancouver than there are Starbucks now. And Vancouver's been like a hardcore weed place for many, many years, like many,
Oh,
many
interesting.
years. So it's been more or less legal here since like 2016. Like cops will not arrest you if you're smoking weed, even though it was technically illegal. Just no one really cared. Um,
Huh.
so yeah, I don't know. I feel like here specifically, it's really weird, and I've heard of again, like I was saying, multiple friends who just felt like it was really hard to actually get to sustainable margins and differentiate themselves suitably. I think part of it is like the hardcore users are not going to really buy in any format other than just buying straight up weed because it's so much cheaper. And you can legally grow it here.
Oh,
It's not hard to grow. I mean, it's like it's a total joke to grow weed. So if you smoke a lot of weed, you just grow and it's cheaper.
yeah, that's interesting. So, um, that was kind of where my head was at. Was that maybe not in like the form factor of like the actual
Mhm,
flower, like you just said,
mhm.
but to me, it seems like a category that would be very hard to build any real brand loyalty in. You know what
I
I
agree. And
mean?
I
Because
think
like,
that's why Breeze is moving. They're not actually selling like people who get high every day, right? And are high 24 hours. They're not selling like the hardcore user. This actually reminds me of Woobles. Like, like the knitting cute little thing? They don't sell to actual crafting enthusiasts. They sell to people who just want to try something and have fun with it.
mhm.
Because actual crafting enthusiasts is too cheap. And I think with Breeze, it's like the same dynamic where you you don't want to sell to like the perpetually stoned guy. It's just he's not going to buy that format because it's way more expensive. His habit will increase in price quite a bit, and obviously it's like not really strong enough either. So I think it's really appealing more to people who just kind of want to have some fun with something.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because then the question becomes, what's the ceiling of that market, right?
Right.
Because there was this I forget like what it was, but there's a thing going around where like the whole like alcohol is dead kind of a narrative that's kind of been perpetuated over the last few years was pretty like debunked just because it's a total power law of like the top 5% of drinkers or whatever are like
I've seen that. Yeah.
80% of the market.
Yeah.
So yeah, the question just becomes like how big of a market really are those sort of non-power users. But I have a few interesting stats for you. So well, actually, first I want to see if you can guess a few of these. Some of the fastest growing consumer markets, and I tweeted this a little bit ago, so I hope you didn't see it yet. Did you see
I
it?
didn't see it. I didn't see it.
Okay. So I did a bunch of research this morning, kind of like, okay, like this seems like a crazy fast growing market, zero, basically zero, not really zero, but, small 9-figure total market size, to Euromonitor thinks that THC beverages are going to be worth 4 billion annually by 2028. So it's about 5 years, call it $4 billion of sort of market created. Can you think of any other markets that might have a similar or faster or slightly slower sort of market explosion from that perspective?
No.
Okay,
Honestly,
so
I'm super not. I don't keep tabs on too much, which is kind of
well, it's
bad.
just
But
I thought it was crazy because I was like, okay, like 0 to 4 billion in 5 years. I didn't really know what that meant. I was like, what is that? Is that good? Is that bad? And so I looked it up, and I think like a good sort of comparable would be like the prebiotic soda.
Mhm.
So obviously, like prebiotic soda has minted probably the two most important. I don't know if this is a hot take, but maybe the two most important unicorns of the last decade in CPG, with obviously Olipop and Poppy. And so that market went from about 0 to 3.5 billion in how many years do you think?
Like 5, 4 or 5, maybe
8.
8. Oh wow. Okay.
So we're counting it. We're counting this year as its eighth year, where total sort of like retail scan
Mhm.
sales
Yeah.
is around 3.5, 4 billion.
But I do think the difficulty with the weed stuff is going to be getting it into retail. Like a lot of retailers are not okay with carrying something like that, and I don't think they ever will be, more or less.
Yeah, maybe not.
And
Which will put a pretty big ceiling on it.
because there's still risk, isn't there? Isn't weed still illegal in the U.S.? So I mean, I thought
I think
banks still
it's
don't like it if you touch it.
I think it's federally. I'm speaking out of my wheelhouse here, but I think it's federally illegal and legal in like states.
Yes,
Um,
but I think because of that, people like banks don't want to deal with you and they don't want the risk. And then I'm guessing because of all that,
yeah.
retailers don't want you either because you're tainted. Other than very certain types of niche retail, right? Like maybe you can sell into weed stores or something like that. But and I think it's a really big problem. I think like for a liquid, it's really hard to be profitable um, selling drinks without retail. I feel like you need it.
Yeah, Breeze seems to have pulled it off, but they're pretty unicorny.
Yeah,
I
they're
totally
really
agree.
good marketers, right? Like both those guys have been. They ran a marketing agency, or they still do, that specializes in advertising that kind of product, and they're very, very good. They're dialed in. So I don't know. Yeah, I think it's hard to compete with them.
So yeah, so prebiotic soda, 8 years, call it 4-ish billion. THC beverage, 5 years, 4 billion or so, if these projections sort of come to fruition. And then the next one is hard seltzer. So hard seltzer was basically like the White Claw era.
I remember. Yeah,
Um, yeah, and that went from like 0 to over 4 billion in less than 5 years. So like White Claw, Truly, High Noon, just like that exploded. So I thought that was like kind of an interesting one. CBD was 3 years to about 4 or 5 billion, because in 2018 it was legalized basically,
Mhm.
and it just took off from there. And then the fastest one that I could find, besides GLP ones, because GLP ones were just
Right.
like just breaking all my charts here, was e-cigarettes in kind of in the Juul
Right.
era. So I think it's kind of interesting how all these like
We
explosive
actually
markets.
did I ever tell you our story with e-cigarettes?
No.
The there is a there's a venture capital firm, and they specialize in investing in vice, and they bought us out of a position. And our position wasn't related to e-cigarettes, but they made their money being one of the first investors in Juul. And when you showed up to their
Mhm.
office, they literally had an airplane in a private, like in an airport hangar, like their own thing in Santa Monica, and they just ran out of there. And when you entered, they have like a periodic table, but it's just all drugs. So it's like WE for weed or something like that.
Oh, that's funny.
Crazy. And it was like three guys, and they had like um 1 to 9 figures they were managing. It was crazy. They
Wow.
made an insane amount of money off Juul. They're like one of the first checks in. Super interesting. But yeah, that space blew up really fast, and
Yeah.
and now it's kind of moved more into like the pouches, whatever you call them.
Yeah, Juul, I mean, I don't know that there's anything like that in the history of consumer
Mhm.
products, honestly. I don't
Well, they
even
got
know
in
that
trouble for
Zyn.
selling cigarettes to kids. I mean, they're clearly marketing to kids. It's pretty horrible, but as bad as it gets. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not advocating for it as a business, but just from a sheer growth perspective, you know, I found it interesting that a lot of these markets were sort of characterized, by like some sort of acute event that then led to the growth,
right,
right? So, like for example, like Juul, basically, like selling cigarettes to kids. Turns out you can sell a lot of those to kids. CBD was legalized. Hard seltzer and prebiotic soda, I think, a little bit less of like an acute, and THC beverage, for as far as I know. There was nothing like acute about like what happened, right? Like CBD was like
no,
legalized, boom, that makes sense. GLP ones like invented, like boom, that makes sense. Hard seltzers like maybe kind of like invented, but I'm sure they were around before like White Claw and whatever else. And then prebiotic soda too. Like these are just like sort of products that people actually just grew to like over maybe a quote unquote longer period of time, right? Which I thought was kind of interesting because that to me would indicate that THC beverage probably has more staying power than I would have initially guessed as like an overall market. But again, to your point, just kind of building brands inside that market is obviously challenging for a whole host of reasons.
And then who are you going to sell to, right? Like, I don't think I see people talking about acquirers in the space, and I'm like, I don't think there's really anyone. I'm not sure who would be okay with, like, Coca-Cola is not going to buy a weed brand. It's not going to do it unless it's been like 20 years and it's way more.
Yeah.
I think they will in like 20
soon.
years, but I don't think they are in the next 5 years. I don't think they are in the next 10 years either. It's just too much of a risk to own that and get in trouble with the feds or something, right? Like, why would you do that for even like another, let's say, 200 million in revenue? It's just stupid. It's so meaningless to them.
Yeah. No, I agree. Regulatory has always been sort of the question or headwind for that category. But
so if
anyways,
you want to brand in the space, it feels like your only real option is just to harvest cash flow, right? And that's why, like, for example, we owned a brand that was in the like vice space, and it wasn't anything like that, but they literally couldn't raise. They talked to over 100 other private equity firms. It's an adult health and wellness company, so they which is a nice way of saying sex toys, but they spoke to like over 100 other firms, couldn't get anywhere with the money. Really smart operator / founders and really good numbers, and they couldn't raise money from anywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think you're right about like I think at some point they will, but it's just it's going to be forever because those things move. Those things move very, very slowly. So I want to jump into the Q&A stuff. I thought that it was worth sort of commenting on a few of those things before. But what do you want to start with here? We got a lot of really good submissions. Thank you to everybody who engaged with Mehtab's tweet here.
We'll call you all out. But first, I want to jump into Fulfill. Fulfill is a modern ERP that makes really running your business substantially easier. I can vouch for it. We use it at one of our brands. We pay the full price, which is kind of I think 6 figures-ish per year. It's e-commerce native. So the problem we've always had with other ERPs, including the big one that you're probably using that I won't name, is you always have to hire a third-party vendor and go through all that integration mess. Have you dealt with that, Drew?
I did a 9-month implementation of the blur of the they who shall not be named, I guess.
Yeah. So that sounds about right for that company. So I mean, Fulfill just makes it so much easier because it's e-commerce native. If you need to connect to Shopify, you're not stuck hiring a third-party vendor. You're not stuck paying that third-party vendor 6 figures and then praying that it works. It just works right out of the box, makes things much easier. Nectar, Majuri, Ridge, and more use them. Again, really awesome. They're one of the few ERPs I've ever used with a great WMS module right out of the box. Most of them have really bad WMS modules that you have to rip out and replace with something else because you will literally lose money if you use them. But with Fulfill, they will make you money. So I would highly recommend swapping over to them. Really good experiences. Nothing but good things to say about the team there. Let them know that Finance Operator sent you. And let's jump back into the episode. Q&A.
Well, I want to make one quick comment about Fulfill. And you mentioned sort of like hiring like a third-party consultant or whatever to like create like a Shopify connection. I did that. Yeah. And I don't think that I can I cannot overstate how stupid and expensive and it was the worst thing ever. And like, if you can find a vendor like Fulfill that has those integrations out of the box, like that is the number one reason in my opinion to do it, because it's just way cheaper and way faster. It's like, I like couldn't believe looking back on that, I can't believe that I ever did anything else.
It's brutal. So yeah, good thing to say about them. Head over to Fulfill, let them know we sent you. So the first question we have here is from Nate that I want to go through. He said, talk about the revenue ranges and the valleys of death, like those mentioned in Scaling Up, and make it tailored to consumer. That is a great question. And it's something I've discussed with my co-founder a lot. I guess we're all familiar with the valleys of death. The software curve is probably the most popular one. do you have any immediate thoughts that you want to get out?
But what do you mean by the software curve?
I feel like most of the values of debt that you see published online are tech specific as opposed to
Oh,
consumer.
yeah. I do. I have a very well thought out and
Oh, cool.
sort of experienced
Let's hear
opinion
it.
on this. But do you want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm curious if you'll agree with this or not. But I think the revenue range in between 4 and 8 million, and I used to say 5 and 7, but now I'm saying 4 and 8 million. I don't have numbers on this, but I would guess that 75% of the companies that run into sort of like working capital issues and end up in a really tough spot are kind of scaling from 1 to 10, and it usually happens in that sort of 4 to 8 range. The reason being is that because when you're growing from, say 100K a month to 500, 700K a month, that's when your POs can actually like start to get as big or sometimes even bigger as like your monthly revenue. And so it just causes like this huge investment in inventory that you like sometimes have a hard time supporting. And then you just, it's basically that simple. And so
And I think
you
part of
just like
that too is, I think part of the reason you see it in that zone specifically is I feel it's really easy to go from 5 million to 10 million in revenue, like to double that. It's not hard. And I think because that's where you commonly see like a double. That's why you run into these working capital issues specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, your camera's out of focus.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Nice, beautiful. But yeah, I think that's why you see a lot of the working capital issues there is because you tend to see a lot of growth early in the curve there. You'll see a double, and then people will be placing as POs. They won't be watching cash flow that tightly. Then they might have been profitable, and then they'll create other issues like surprise tax, etc. So, and I think at the same point, you have a lot of just random other issues popping in. You're kind of learning the model. You're still relatively immature brand, right? Like you can be 2-3 years old and doing 10 million a year in revenue. It's not uncommon. And you just don't have that many reps. So
Yeah, we Mad Rabbit, we went from our 7 figure. We only had 1 year where we were doing 7 figures, technically, where we went from like 3 million to 10 million, and we forecasted 10 million that year, so we hit it. And then that was what sort of gave us like a really nice foundation for our demand planning, and like we nailed it sort of all the way there.
cool.
But I remember thinking all the time, I was like, holy shit, like if we had planned this, like if we didn't plan for this level of growth, we would have been in a pretty tough spot.
Mm-hmm.
So we got lucky, but a lot of people don't, because they either think they're going to grow more than they are, or they don't grow as much as they want to. And so it can kind of create, that sort of death valley, I guess. Do you agree with that range that I gave, or do you think there's a different range?
No, it sounds about right. I will say by category, it varies a ton. So if you're doing something like food and bev, Will from IQ Bar did a really good thing on this on the main operators. He was just talking about how it's really hard to be a profitable like food or snack company until you're doing 50, I think it was 50 plus million. You just consume a lot of capital, and getting those retail placements is expensive. Maintaining those retail placements is expensive, and showing there's good sell through and not getting kicked out is expensive. And I'd agree with that. Not for that category. It's very expensive, and it's hard to get to real scale, and you need real scale to reach profitability. I think it really is category dependent, is what we've seen. Like jewelry, for example, you tend to reach a sweet spot. I'd say there's different like sweet spots for everything too. So for example, it's relatively easy to get to 5 million and be really profitable. So you'll typically see something like 5 million revenue running at like 20% net or something cool, but still small and not really a sellable company. So if they wanted to go from 5 million to 20 million or something where you actually start becoming attractive.
Yeah.
I think that's where they see a lot of margin compression, right? And you start to have to build a team. You have to do all these other things. You have to build new muscles. You don't really need a team to run a brand doing 5 million. It can be you and like 2 German Shepherds, right? But like, if you want to scale up and you want to go to 20 million, or you want to gear a company up for growth, you need to hire, and it just creates a lot more work, and it creates a lot more things that can go wrong. So, yeah.
Are there any death valleys after the sort of mid 7 figure range, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think you can run into issues where, and this can happen anywhere for anything, where like trend might fall off for the hero product, and then you'll see the company quickly decline.
Mm.
I think it's something to be really conscious of. You need to think through, why is my revenue what my revenue is? Is it because I'm brilliant, or is it because I caught trend really well? And it could be a mix of both, right? But you might not be as good at operating as you think you are. And you may have just caught trend, which is good, but you need to diversify and make sure that you're not going to be screwed when that trend falls off and sales for your hero product die out.
And that's just a function of like however big the market is, I guess, for whatever that product is.
Yeah, and sometimes trend can last a long time, right? And it can be like, I think water bottles is a good example. They got really, really popular through COVID. Are you familiar with Stanley's revenue curve?
I know they were at like 800 million at one point. That's all I know.
They were doing like 75 million a year or 100 million a year for a long, long time. That company is 75 years old or something. It was pretty shitty investment if you think about it, right? Like if you bought it just in 75 million a year, next 10 years, like, oh, this is kind of dog shit. And then it skyrocketed, like you said, went to like, I think 800 million plus or a billion plus very quickly. And now that space is kind of falling out of favor, if that makes sense. But it's still in a much better place than it was pre-COVID. So again, you can end up somewhere kind of okay, even if trend falls out, but you need to be aware that trend is carrying you, and you can't be surprised if you start to see revenue decline. You need to plan for it. You need to be ready for it. In the interim, you need to use the cash that you're receiving to take many more bets.
Okay, so maybe not like as broad of a Death Valley then.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
And again, category dependent, like jewelry. Jewelry tends to get really popular around, really profitable around kind of 25 to 30 million in revenue is where you tend to see EBITDA margins expand quite a bit, where you can do cooler things with your factories, et cetera. I think it's just a function of what the supply chain looks like, to be honest with you, and how good you are on the supply chain side. But that's not a good example, I think. And it's easy to run a subscale jewelry brand very, very profitably. But if you want to do really cool things, move fast on the product side, you need good relationships with suppliers. And it's hard to become anyone they care about until you're doing kind of 20, 30 million in top line.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. What other questions do we got here?
Okay. We have don't love this one, but I can speak to it. Let's see. Explain cram downs. Sean Frank from Ridge. I think I know that guy. Let's do it.
It sounds familiar. I forget. I feel like I've talked to him once or twice.
Two first names. So, weird guy.
Yeah, no, it's a good topic. And I thought that when he brought that up in the group chat, I don't know, a week or two ago or whenever it was, I like how your mind went kind of into like the debt route sort of idea of it. And I immediately sort of answered around like the equity side. So I want you to kind of explain it to me, although I imagine it's basically the same thing, about what does it look like from a debt perspective. And then maybe I can talk a little bit about some equity rounds.
Yeah, more or less. I think just in general, the phrase means subordinating another party as you enter, right? It's like if you're the newest debt in, you'll typically want to subordinate the existing senior secured lender, and that just means you push them down in priority. So if there is a bankruptcy or something like that, they sit below you. It's just a broad phrase used in finance, I think, or at least that's the way I think about it. And that's where my head went immediately when he mentioned it. And then I think he was actually more so referring to the equity side. If someone raised a bunch of venture, things aren't going well, et cetera. Do you want to explain the context? What happens next?
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting that you used the word subordinate, because that's obviously sort of true. Although it's not probably technically what happens in practice in like equity financings, right? You just get diluted out, right? Yeah. So like you could own, like you're not technically subordinated, although I guess probably you are.
You lose the pref, right? Like you lose the pref typically.
Yeah. So it's like, I might own 50%.
We should walk through what the pref is.
Preference stack just being sort of like the order in which stakeholders get paid. So it could be debt, like senior secured debt is sort of like the first, preferred. Then anything subordinated would be under that. And then in preferred equity, it's usually actually last in, first out. So like if you've raised through Series B, that Series B stock, for example, is going to be the first out money, and then Series A, and then seed, and then anything before that. So it's literally just like the order in which people get paid, basically.
Yep.
But so like from like when I hear cram down, I'm thinking basically about like a down round. In the sense that like, I might own 50% of a company that, I bought at $100 million of valuation or whatever. And then I don't know, 2 years later, the company is raising, at a $5 million valuation, let's say. And a lot of times, like that $5 million round valuation will be like the pre-money, and the company will raise, 95 million at a $5 million pre or whatever. And so you get the same like post money valuation of like 100 million.
Yep.
But the structure is like totally recapped. And so like if I don't sort of quote unquote like pay to play in that round, then I'll actually basically just own nothing anymore. And so you effectively just get crammed out by new money. Although from an equity perspective, it's basically just like massive dilution. And a lot of times, if you don't sort of pay, they call it like pay to play. And if you don't pay to play, you're totally just like out, which is like, to me, is like crazy. Like I don't, it sucks that like you can literally just like basically get screwed, because a lot of small investors like probably don't even have the opportunity to sort of fight against that.
Yeah, I guess you can always take liquidity out. Like usually there's some room for secondary. If you're worried about it, you can sell some stock.
Yeah, but I just mean like if this is a company that's raised like 50 million bucks, and
Mhm.
one day I invested 200K, and it looked like it was going to be doing really well, like this whole thing might happen without even me even knowing about it.
Right. No, that's true.
Yeah.
Um, okay. What do you want to dive into next here? There's a good one up here. Oh, Cody from Jones Road Beauty and Marketing Operators. Great show. Everyone should go listen to it. What do marketers get wrong about finance? We
I
should
want
call
to
them
hear
marketeers,
your
by the way.
what's your answer to this one?
Um, I don't know if I see anything super repeat and common that happens over and over. I do feel like sometimes what'll happen is you'll see certain ideas or concepts posted on Twitter. People learn about them like, oh, wow, this is cool and new and shiny. And they won't think about the other side of it, or like the controlling KPI, if that makes sense. Like you talked about the CCC, right? Like it's cool if your cash conversion cycle is negative, but you need to be aware that if it is really negative, if growth slows down, it really slaps you in the face, like quite hard. And it can put you in a tricky situation. So that's the main thing, is just if you're learning about something or a certain concept, you need to be aware of the other side of that, right? So it'd be something like, just think of the marketing equivalent. Like, I don't know what the marketing equivalent would be, but anyways, I think that's the main thing to be aware of. If you're learning about a concept, just think about what the other side of that looks like the CCC example. What about you?
I would say the number one thing that marketers maybe get wrong or don't think about or don't realize is that in this business model specifically, like D2C consumer products, um, they are the finance in a lot of ways. Like they drive the business model in such a meaningful way that everything that they know and do and look at is actually finance, and not really marketing, and specifically performance marketing. Like performance marketing is like way closer to finance than it is to brand marketing, right? Like when we start to
Yep.
talk about like all these quantitative metrics, like click through, CPM, CAC, AOV, like all this stuff. These are all the sort of like drivers that any banker is going to use to sort of build a financial model. And so one thing that I've been maybe frustrated with for the last 10 years, 5 years, is like these marketers, like they know everything like the back of their hand when it comes to CTR and CPM and AOV and CAC and whatever else. But then as soon as you start to talk about like the balance sheet or whatever, they just go like completely numb. And I'm like, but no, like you're driving all the outcome that feeds to the balance sheet by doing
Yep.
this budget and this spend and this CAC and this returning customers or whatever else. And it's like they tend to not understand some of the more like mechanical sort of tactical finance stuff, but it's not because they don't understand it. It's because they think that they're not supposed to understand it, when in reality they already know it like fairly well.
Right.
And so it's kind of like you can be a very special, operator if you start from the marketing perspective and learn the finance side, because I think it's way easier to kind of go that way than it is to go the other way. For example, like all the sort of controllers or CFOs of the world, like if you try to teach those guys, about CPMs, like they're just not going to know what you're talking about. And so I generally get fired up about this because I'm like, no, if you would just think about it for one more second, you would realize that you do understand all this stuff. Not only do you understand it, but you actually have control over it.
Right. That makes sense. Cool. Let's talk about your financial reporting or meet. So Richard from doesn't list his company here, but Richard Greenup, he asked about our financial reporting or meeting cadence within the C-suite and or greater team. In that reporter meeting, what are the top 3 things you talk about? Yeah, I can go if you want.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for us, it varies by company. If it's a turnaround or distress situation that we're invested in, we're meeting daily and we're looking at cash inflows and outflows daily if it's really distressed. Otherwise, it's like an every 3-day thing if it's moderately distressed. And the main things we're talking about are just ensuring our plans kind of going accordingly to whatever we had discussed prior. And again, if it's a turnaround, that plan changes almost daily, right? Like you might be in negotiations with a lender, let's say like they're in default $4 million or something. If you can make payments here and there and stay out of their crosshairs, the plan would be very different than if they start to get aggressive legally, right? Maybe you need to move some cash around, pay a retainer lawyer, buy some time in court, etc. So it just depends on the company. If something's healthy, usually it gets discussed. We run most of our companies on EOS/Traction. So that gets discussed in the weekly leadership meeting, and there's certain core financial KPIs we're looking at. And then we will have like a reporting package that we want, typically. Depends on the complexity of the business, that we review every month. And that's okay. Pretty normal. It's like just your 3 statements, plus like some sort of rolling cash forecast, like a 13-week or something. Specifically, we spend a lot of time looking at unit economics. So ensuring that those are really healthy and those stay healthy. And then I think the bigger thing with unit economics is looking at each line item, giving it an owner, and then making sure that owner knows how they're doing. So for example, if you're tracking something like spend or revenue, the marketing team should know what that looks like and what the implications are for the company and how that in fact affects the net income for whatever the period is, or the net operating margins. Or maybe it's something like a packaging expense, right? Like packaging is a percentage of revenue. If it moved from like 0.8 to 1%, why did it move? What happened? Is it because the order composition changed? Blah, blah, blah. Who owns that? And then you need to know why the numbers are moving. So for us, that's really important. But it's more important just to make sure we're watching the changes and we know that the changes are happening. And then the appropriate team knows that they're expected to deal with that and they know why it's changed. They should have a good answer for that. So yeah, that's very high level. I think we specifically try to stay away from extremely onerous reporting packages. Like a lot of private equity and VC will stick very onerous reporting packages on companies. I think it's because they don't truly understand how the companies work because they don't have an operating background. And because of that, they really just want more and more reporting, even though it doesn't help them with anything. They think that they can explain. Yeah. If they ask you, like, hey, why did CAC go up? The reality is, honestly, a lot of time there is no good answer for why CAC went up. No one can actually tell you why CAC went up. You could say, like, oh, this metric degraded, but no one really knows why, right? Like maybe it's a meta backend switch or something. But these firms won't understand, so they'll want more reporting. So it just gets kind of stupid. And you end up with these crazy reporting packages that take a CFO like 10 hours, 15 hours to prepare, and the CEO has to review it and stuff so they don't look stupid in front of the board. It just gets really silly. It's a lot of wasted time, I think, that could be spent building the company.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's a few different so given that, like, obviously Iris is financial planning and analysis, I've thought about this quite a bit. I agree with you on the weekly and the monthly part. So I think, like, I always think about finance. There's 2 types of finance, right? Like there's like strategic finance and there's tactical finance. Right. So the tactical finance is guided by the weekly cash flow model, which I think in general should be sort of talked about at least weekly. And in some cases, like you said, if it's a really cash tight situation, obviously every day it makes sense. But at the very least, weekly, you should kind of be going through your working capital sources and uses and making sure that you have that according to a plan. Because I think one thing that people maybe don't do a good enough job of is like kind of like standstilling their initial budget, right? So like if you make a 13-week cash flow model on January 1st or whatever, and then you meet about it weekly, like you should always keep that original forecast and just kind of see like where you're actually at compared to what you originally thought was going to happen. Um, and so like obviously like if those, if that, I always say about Iris, like there's two lines, like there's a forecast line and there's an actuals line, and
Right.
our whole job is to keep those two lines as close together as possible. And so as those lines get further and further apart, you should have more meetings, but as they're closer together, there's a little bit less to talk about.
I
And then
agree.
so like on the monthly side, you have like classic variance analysis, right? From a 3-statement perspective, like what did we think was going to happen from a budgeting perspective, and what actually happened. And then I also liked what you said about the unit economic analysis. So like, one of the things that we have in our platform is like daily contribution margin tracking, which is
Oh, cool.
it's an output for unit economics. And like, you know, like Taylor has this with his clients, and a lot of people have talked about this, and that's like the thing where it's like people keep an eye on it every single day. And so you want to make sure that you're having good unit economics every day. You want to make sure that you're reviewing cash like at least weekly. And then those two things, so unit economics is like kind of the income statement variance analysis, and then cash flow is kind of the balance sheet variance. And so if you keep an eye on your contribution margin, and then you keep an eye on your weekly cash flows, you're doing well. Your monthly strategic variance review should be pretty light, because you're kind of keeping daily and weekly guardrails around both of those things. And so that's I call it the brick by brick approach a lot of times,
Right.
where you can kind of do it like a bottoms up. And so there should be never any surprises during your sort of monthly variance review. But yeah, I'm basically just saying a little bit more in depth, like the same things that you said. I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't
I just
know.
want to say, if you are raising third-party equity or even credit, try to negotiate the reporting part down quite a bit, because I think it's a huge waste of time, especially VCs that aren't tactical. Like, is a 24-year-old associate going to say anything useful to you, given they're not in consumer full time? No, they're not. They're not going to tell you anything that's tactical and useful. So they don't need that much in the reporting side. They shouldn't have you pulling stupid reports. This is assuming like you're pretty good at actually pulling reports that matter and you have a good reporting structure internally. But if you have that buttoned up and you feel like it's good, I don't think the VC needs as much as they think they need. And again, a lot of it's just so they can say they have it. It's just really stupid internal politics. So I would try to get away from that as much as possible.
Have you can you describe an onerous reporting package that you've seen? I've actually never had something that I thought was that bad.
There was a company we were invested in that had like 12 or 13 million in revenue, maybe slightly more. And the team was spending, I think it was taking up the founder's time roughly 10 hours a month. And then it was taking up their CFO's time, which again, they had to have a CFO because of this. It was taking like 20 hours of his time. And I was just like, guys, the company does 12 million a year. It doesn't need this crazy reporting package. They need to figure out how to go from 12 million to 30 million in revenue, not sit around and like put together reporting packages. It's cool, but why do we need this? Really silly. So just watch out for that. It's fairly common. And I see it a lot with PE more than VC, like PE backed companies where they're still doing like 50 million a year and they have all this crazy reporting. I'm like, you don't need that crazy reporting. You just need to get good and learn what you're actually investing in. So Jacob from 10X ROAS, they're actually an agency we've used a bunch for creative, good guys. They have a crazy buttoned up process. He asked how to do 13-week cash flow forecasts properly. I say sign up for Iris, go use Iris, and you'll be there. No need to do anything. That is an option though. How to do them properly. I don't know. Do you feel like there's really a proper way to do them?
Well, so I always had like my way. And then if you remember, I don't know, this was 8 months ago or whatever, I hit you up and I was like, hey, I want to see how you do it.
You spoke with Alex, my co-founder, right?
Yeah. I actually paid him to tell me how he does it. And I paid him for him to tell me that he does it the exact same way that we do it or that I do it. And I was like, okay, that's actually worth paying for though. And so I don't know that there's a wrong way to do it. If you're using common sense, honestly, the sort of advantage or where you can go is just like how granular can you make and how many controls can you put around it. Right. So like at the end of the day, it's literally just money in and money out.
Mhm.
And like one of the reasons that I think it's like, not to plug Iris again here, but like one of the reasons that I think software is a very powerful tool for this is because like when you're talking about like bank level transactions, like nobody's exporting 2,000 bank transactions into an Excel sheet and like doing bottoms up sort of variance
No, it's
review
super
on those
painful.
things.
Like for color,
Yeah.
without Iris or something like that, at one of our portfolio companies, we literally have someone offshore who's doing it quite a bit and updating that quite a bit, and it's very painful. What do you feel the advantages are of the 13-week? Just while we're here, that you want to go over? Like, why should people put one
Um,
together? Why does it matter?
Yeah, I think well it matters because it's basically your lifeblood, honestly. Just because these companies like we've said are so working capital intensive. And I mentioned just a few minutes ago that it's basically the control mechanism for your balance sheet forecast, right? And so like I think I really like that a lot of these marketing agencies are kind of taking a more finance focused mindset. One of the things that I've seen that I cannot believe is that they'll do a P&L forecast for you without considering the implications in your balance sheet because they don't know how to forecast balance sheets. And they'll say, okay, guys, like, look, we're going to grow from 10 to 20 million this year. Here's your financial forecast. And it's just a P&L. And then you're kind of like, okay, like if I were to attach a balance sheet with like this P&L, we would have run out of money by Q2.
Yeah, totally.
um,
And
yeah.
I
And so
feel like if you know the 13, I think the advantage of building and maintaining a 13-week cash flow model is that you really learn how your company reacts to different movements and different changes in unit economics or certain other events, right? Like if CAC goes up 20% tomorrow, what happens to my cash in 2 weeks? Just stuff like that. And I think you start to get a better feel for it once you've run the company for a while. Once you've looked at that 13-week cash flow model on a weekly basis or daily basis for a long time and really start to understand it, right? And like you said, it's important you don't run out of cash. So the I feel that's where it helps you a lot. And I do feel when founders start to look at it on a regular basis, they start to learn what's important, what matters, what moves the needle, what doesn't move the needle, right? Um, Especially on the unit economic side, it all trickles down.
Yeah, and it also you can just catch like stupid mistakes pretty easily, right? So like if you're just if you have a budget for software of $5,000 this month or whatever, you're not gonna see that you accidentally spent $15,000 if you're not kind of going through the tactics of the 13-week cash flow model until it's probably too late and you've already spent an extra 25 grand. So
Right.
um there's a million and one reasons to have a good grasp on that stuff. The only problem is like you said, it's pretty grungy. Like there's a lot of different transactions and a lot of different sources. Like I mean, think of it like I actually at one point in Mad Rabbit, I stopped doing it
Mhm.
because like we had Walmart, we had CVS, we had Urban Outfitters, we had Amazon, we had Shopify, we had obviously payroll, Facebook, Google, TikTok. There's a million and one different things, and I was just like, we're fine on cash. Like I'm just not. This isn't worth my time. I was a pretty small department though. So if I had any more resources, I think I might have had my controller kind of keep doing it. I stopped caring about it at some point because it wasn't really worth the effort.
Right.
Given that like our business was like fairly predictable and we had a good handle on how things went. So
Yeah, and I like what you said
um,
about the kind of forecasted versus actual lines, and the more they diverge, the more attention you need to pay to this kind of thing. And I feel like there's that, and then also if the business is relatively new and you haven't been running it for like 5 years or something like that, you won't really fully understand how cash moves through the company for a little bit. It'll take you a little while. You have to really understand how it moves, and once you know that, you get a better feel for like, oh, should I be looking at cash daily or weekly or monthly, et cetera.
the only other thing I would also add is it's funny because the 13-week cash flow model. The people who care about it the most are on one end of a spectrum. Either they have no money or they have so much money, and then they have so much money that they're trying to figure out how much money can I take out as like dividends or distributions or
Mhm.
whatever. And then in the middle, it's like I still encourage you to have it because it is your balance sheet forecast, but you're maybe not as dialed into the sort of day to day movements of the cash. So um, if you're taking dividends, like that's another good reason to do it because like we had this one customer that was they were paying themselves monthly distributions, and they were kind of just like freeballing it based off like what they sort of felt like they had, and then so we sat down and
Right.
like made a model with them, and this dude's paying himself like 50 extra grand a month or something now, just because
Cool.
like they realized if I just look at it a little bit more closely, You know, and that's not even necessarily like an Iris thing. That's just like a, are you paying attention thing.
Yeah, and that's something we find all the time too. Is we'll find there's a lot of excess liquidity sitting in a company and cash that's not really doing anything. Um, so a lot of times we'll get a ping and someone will be like, "Oh, I need to raise this much money to do X." I'll say, "No, you need to raise like 5% of that or 10% of that." Because a lot of these, once you free up some cash, you can put it into other initiatives, and then everything kind of pays for itself. If that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So once we find a few of those wins, I think people start to see. Most of the time, they don't believe me; they think we're crazy, and then we'll just show them examples. We'll just rip through like their P&L and their balance sheet, et cetera. We'll go through certain expenses, or we'll go through certain other line items, and we'll show them like you guys are actually sitting on way more cash than you think, or vice versa. So always a pleasant surprise either way. Anything else you want to cover? That's pretty much it?
No. Any other questions from the Q&A that you thought were interesting?
I think I'll save most of these for another episode. I like Zach's question. Zach from Holloway and Easy Street. Really good question, but I want to save it for another episode.
Okay. We can do it. Cool. Yeah, we could do a whole episode on this.
Cool. Let's call it there. Thanks again to our sponsors, Fulfill, Iris, Numeral, and Fondue. Ping them all, buy all their software, and keep them very happy.